go.
You ready?
Yeah.
We're gonna discuss the second middle passage. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2.
The second middle passage was what I like to tell people in America. This is the story that affected so-called Negroes in America the most. I know they show us the transatlantic slave trade, and this is not stealing the thunder from the ancestors, but they show us the out of Africa slave trade, and they go right to cotton fields. Like, whoa, wait a minute, that's about 200 years of, wait a minute, how do you get from the shores of Africa picking cotton? And if you research right now, even in 2024, per capita, there are more Africans in Brazil than any other America, which lets you know more Africans came into South and Central America than North America. And the question I like to ask people is, if Africans were brought into North America, when were they brought here? What year? Because in 1808, it was outlawed. And keep 1808 in mind, because around 1830s, that's when cotton started booming. That's when you start seeing niggas in plantation fields and so on and so forth. And now the whole idea of slavery, of course, is just labor. America, the southern states were in such desperate need for great labor. Did the southern states have labor pool? They did. They had to get white indentured servants, but they couldn't keep up. And before 1808, a lot of those white indentured servants had fled the northern colonies. Put things into perspective. 1808, they had not went out west yet. You still had the original 13 colonies, a couple of southern states, except for Florida and Louisiana. We didn't go that far yet. Texas still belonged to Mexico. Just to put everything into perspective. 1808, we haven't quite got to Missouri yet. That was the Great Compromise, a little bit later. We haven't got that far yet. Rhode Island is about to be set up too. William Penn got Pennsylvania on lock. New York is halfway there, or what they call New Amsterdam. It's halfway there. Georgia is just about to be signed up by James Oglethorpe. James Oglethorpe receives permission from King George. How ironic, he names it Georgia after King George. He gets permission to set up a charter, which James Oglethorpe becomes the trustee of this charter. And in the language of finding out words like trustees and charters, and if you don't believe me, every state, every city has a charter date. You go into your courtroom, that big seal behind the administrator, it'll tell you the date of the charter. Now the trustees were always barons, who they call Lombards, capitalists, Europeans, under what was called back then the Virginia Company, the Pennsylvania Company, the Philadelphia Company, New England Tea Company. These are companies. And these individuals decide, well, we need more territory, we need more land. And this is way before any Africans stepped foot in North America. That's not to say they were not here in the capacity they show us, not yet, okay? Because they had to go back to people like John Hanson, who we hear about often, who was the first president of America, but you can't say first president of America. There was no America at that time. It was called the Continental Congress, House of Burgess. Those were the establishing entities who were in the colonies at that time. So did we have an African influence of African people? We like today, y'all, we were everywhere. This is our planet. But in the capacity of how they show us in America in that time frame, no, it's a bunch of not. And they can't prove it. The first time Africans come to North America in quantity is Fort Comfort, Virginia. Hampton, Virginia. And those 19 or so Africans were brought by way of a hijacking of another ship. They were found in the Gulf of Mexico, and they were brought here. The movie Amistad shows you that situation. You see how they show you movies, but you don't know what they're talking about? Now fast forward, 1830s, 1841, the movie 12 Years a Slave. When the movie first comes on, the gentleman is walking through the streets of New York, it says 1841. Nobody caught that. He said, I was born a free man. Got to stop the movie. Free man, who were the free men? Who were the free Negroes? Who were the freedmen? There were free people here? Of course we were already here already, right? We talk about pilgrims and Indians. When did the pilgrims come? Who were here when they got here? Nobody tells you about Chief Tamachichi in Georgia, Chief Metacon, Nobody talks about the Pamunkey, the Wampanoag, the Yamasee, the Yomacraw. These are the darker colored tribes nobody talks about on the East Coast. Because like I tell people all the time, they have taught us through psychoneurosis to look off the front porch of America. You forgot about the back porch, which is California. You have never heard a history of the back porch of America. They keep your attention divided on Africa the whole time while they're robbing you out the back door, right? If I keep you looking out your front window the whole time, I can rob your whole kitchen and go out your back door. You never know I was in the house. And that's what they did, psychologically. 1808, slavery is outlawed. International slave trade is outlawed. So from 1808 to about 1834, these Europeans get real crafty. Slave breeding farms come up. You got to figure out how do we get labor down to the South, because at this time it's called the Black Belt, which is right below Tennessee, all through Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. It's called the Black Belt. There's a huge deposit of rich black soil that can grow anything you put in the ground. And cotton was the number one thing. It was called King Cotton. And this is the divide. Mississippi divides first, or succeeds from the Union. And they just got set up. They don't work their ass off and kill half of the Indians, they'll push half of the so-called Indians back. And I'm using the word Indian as the colloquial sense because we know they were not Indian, the indigenous people. You don't get Indian until around 1971, the term itself. But they're now pushing these people back off the East Coast. I explained to the brother a little bit earlier, those pilgrims had a hard time getting on Virginia Beach coming into Norfolk. If you know where Norfolk is, they had a hard time, right? And even in that area today, look them up. The Powhatan, the Pamunkey, between Baltimore all the way down to Virginia, into the Carolinas, right? The Natchez Indians, that's who the ancestor Nat Turner was. He was a Natchez chief. Eliza Quitman Drew, Noble Drew Ali's father, Cherokee Indian in that territory. So when we get to have these conversations, we have to ask ourselves, who was in these territories and when did it happen? Second, domestic slave trade. They can't bring nobody else into America. Cotton is booming. What was the great divide between the North and the South? Jefferson Davis becomes the president of the Confederacy, and that Confederacy already existed. The white boys did not create anything. That flag with that cross on there was called the Galactic Cross, and those were your ancestors. Nothing to do with them at all. Y'all giving too much credit. Jefferson Davis sets up the White House in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. The White House is still there today. Divides from the Union. Cotton takes over. The South supplied 80% of the world's cotton. Cotton was the number one GDP, followed by tobacco and rice out of Carolina. But cotton was killing it. But they had a small labor pool because those white indentured servants who came over here years before, they were runaways. Fugitive Slave Act, not for black people, not for us, that's for them. So many Europeans ran away from the colonies into Georgia, which was not set up yet. James Oglethorpe felt sorry for those felons and established the state of, or the colony of Georgia for runaway white slaves.